Hello, darling. It's Evelyn. And let me just tell you, I never intended to become the villain of Christmas. But when my son told me his fiancée, a girl I had never met, would be moving into my home during the holidays, uninvited, ungrateful, and with opinions about my decorations, well, I decided to plan a surprise. Not the kind that goes in a box, the kind that leaves a legacy. It was early December when Caden called, voice full of that oblivious cheer that only a man in love or denial can muster. Mom, just a heads up, Meredith will be staying with us for the holidays. Her lease is up and we figured, you've got space. I stared at the phone in my hand like it had grown horns. We figured. Not, would it be okay? Not, can we talk about this? Just a decision, made without me, about my own house. The house I built after Harold passed. The house I paid off with late nights balancing other people's books. The house with the sunroom I never let anyone touch, because that was my space, my peace. And now some 27-year-old I'd never met was going to be moving in, sleeping in the guest room, helping herself to my coffee, bringing in her little dog or her dietary preferences, or her laptop and assumptions and her filtered opinions about Christmas tinsel. Of course, darling, I said, because I'm not a fool. Never rage in the moment. Save it. Use it. Turn it into something that lasts. The week before Christmas, Meredith arrived. Leather boots up to her knees, dragging 2 oversized suitcases, and wearing that look of mild disappointment that some women have perfected. Like they're always about to whisper cute while judging your entire lifestyle. Oh, she said, stepping inside. It's quaint. Quaint? I stood in my own foyer, her shadow falling across my hardwood floors, and smiled. Welcome, dear. She breezed past me like she owned the place, gave Caden a kiss that was more performance than affection, tossed her coat over the banister, and then, as if scripted, looked at my fireplace mantel and said, "Do you do real garlands, or are these—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The tinsel was vintage, from 1976. I had bought it with Harold the year we couldn't afford a tree, and we hung it across the mantel like it was gold. Every year since, I've pulled it out. The silver's faded in places, the glitter flakes a little, but it shines where it matters. I like tradition, I said. Oh, of course, she replied, in that tone that means the opposite. But wouldn't it be fun to do something more Instagrammable this year? That was the moment, darling. Not the move-in, not the suitcases, not even the fact that she rearranged my spice rack by aesthetic. It was the word Instagrammable spoken in my home like it was sacred scripture. That was when I decided I was going to give her the most unforgettable Christmas she had ever seen, but not in the way she expected. Oh no, she wanted elevated. She wanted curated. She wanted something polished and shiny and soulless. She was about to get Evelyn's version of a curated experience, and it came with paper receipts, forgotten contracts, and a house deed with one name on it. Mine. Only mine. I stayed quiet for the first few days. That's the trick, you see. You let them settle in, let them get comfortable, too comfortable. I watched her little patterns form, like footprints in wet cement. How she took the last of my cream without mentioning it. How she'd slide in on Caden's laptop in my sunroom, legs curled up on my armchair like it wasn't something sacred. How she'd call her mother and speak in that hushed voice, whispering about the vibe of the house and how we might want to reimagine the space. We. As if she'd bought a single brick of this place. But I let it go, because I wasn't playing the short game. I was planning something long, layered, and airtight. Caden, bless him, didn't notice. Men rarely do. He just beamed anytime she said something vague and supportive about their shared future, nodding like he'd swallowed a Hallmark card. I didn't interrupt when he casually mentioned over dinner, 2 nights after her arrival. Oh, Meredith's thinking of launching a home business in the new year. She might even use the sunroom to start. My fork paused midair. The sunroom. My sunroom. I turned to her then. She smiled sweetly, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, but you could already taste the salt. Just something simple, she said. Candles, maybe handmade oils, an apothecary line. You know, wellness vibes. You'd love it, Evelyn. So, soothing. Soothing. I looked at the girl who hadn't lifted a dish, who scrolled through her phone while I folded linens, and who still hadn't once thanked me for opening my home. And I smiled. Sounds lovely, dear, I said. Just be careful with essential oils. The last woman who tried that in my house set a curtain on fire. Oh? She asked, laughing too hard. No, I said, still smiling. She really did. She went quiet after that, but only for a moment, because Christmas Eve was coming, and that was when she made her boldest move yet. She told me, in my own kitchen, while I basted a ham I had prepped since dawn, that the next morning, her family would be joining us for Christmas brunch. Oh, I said, turning to her slowly. I didn't realize we were hosting. Well, it's sort of a blended holiday now, she replied. We figured it'd be better than doing 2 separate mornings, and anyway, I already told them you'd be fine with it. She told them. I wiped my hands on a towel. Caden was nowhere in sight. He'd gone to pick up some last-minute wine, probably Chardonnay, because she said red clashed with her dress. I see, I said. They're a bit high energy, she added. But I think it'll be good for you. Stretch your boundaries. Maybe help you modernize things a bit. I was thinking a waffle board. Do you have a lazy Susan? I almost laughed. Darling, I am the lazy Susan. I've been spinning around, serving everyone else, since before she was born. That night, when the house was finally quiet and the candles had burned low, I sat in my sunroom, just me and the Christmas lights, and I pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting in the back of my filing cabinet for almost 15 years. A will, updated twice, deeds, a letter of ownership, and a clause that Caden had forgotten existed, one that gave me full discretion over the use of the home, including approval over any cohabitation not involving direct family. You see, darling, I bought this house outright after Harold passed. Every shingle, every tile, every creaky stair. And when Caden moved back in after college, I let him, because that's what mothers do. And when he stayed, I adjusted. And when Meredith arrived, I tolerated. But now it was time for Christmas morning, and I had a surprise. The house was still dark when I woke up Christmas morning. I moved quietly, the way only women who've spent decades getting up before everyone else can. My slippers found the old paths of the wood floor, the kitchen still warm from yesterday's baking. But today was not about cinnamon rolls. Today was about clarity. I set the table for brunch exactly the way I always had. The good china, the cloth napkins, the little pine cone place cards I made when Caden was in 2nd grade. The tablecloth was a deep cranberry red. No pastel nonsense, no minimalist marble chargers, just warmth, soul, mine. Meredith came down around 8 in a silk robe and a tight little smile. Oh, you already set the table, she said, glancing around. I was thinking we could do it a bit more neutral, sage and ivory, more elevated. I already have, I said, folding a napkin, but you're welcome to set up a folding table in the garage if that's more your aesthetic. She blinked, clearly trying to decide whether I was joking. I didn't flinch. Before she could reply, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a small, suited man with kind eyes and a clipboard. Evelyn Halston? Yes. Ma'am, I'm here to serve a notice of termination of temporary residency. Meredith appeared beside me, her mouth slightly open. What? It's a legal notice, I explained, taking the paper calmly. This isn't an eviction, dear. It's simply an official end to a guest stay. You see, you're not a tenant. There's no lease. And per clause B7 of the deed, which Caden co-signed 10 years ago, I have sole discretion over who stays in this house and for how long. She went white. I smiled. Your brunch guests are still welcome, of course, but you, my dear, will need to spend the night elsewhere. You're throwing me out on Christmas? she hissed. No, sweetheart, I'm giving you the gift of perspective. Caden came in through the garage just then, holding 2 bottles of wine and wearing that same dazed expression he always gets when faced with female conflict. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. She's having me removed, Meredith snapped, waving the paper. I'm simply asserting my rights, I said calmly. In the home I paid for, maintained, and opened to you without once being asked how I felt about it. Mom, Caden started. No, I said, turning to him. You made plans, son. You let her move in without talking to me. You let her rearrange my pantry, put eucalyptus in my bathroom, and mock my Christmas decorations. And I said nothing. Because you're always so gracious, Meredith said, her voice tightening. No, I corrected. Because I was watching. I was waiting. I was measuring whether you were someone I could share a home with. You were not. Silence stretched between us, tense as piano wire. Then came the knock. Her parents. A man in an expensive coat and a woman whose hair was so flat-ironed it looked like glass. They swept in with air kisses and an armload of gifts wrapped in muted tones. We've brought duck prosciutto, her mother announced. I looked at Meredith. You have until 3 p.m. to vacate. Your belongings will be packed and labeled. You're unbelievable, she said, shaking. You think you can humiliate me in front of my family? I think, I said, folding the legal document and slipping it into my apron, that you should have respected the woman whose house you walked into before trying to redecorate her life. She didn't speak. Not then. Not when I turned and asked her parents if they'd prefer cider or coffee. Not when Caden sat down slowly at the table, his expression stunned. Not when I pulled out the last surprise, a little card with a single sentence, handed quietly to her across the table. Inheritance is not a guarantee. Respect is. She didn't leave quietly. Of course she didn't. At precisely 2:17 p.m., she emerged from the guest room like a villainess in the final act of a play, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, lips pinched, dragging her wheeled suitcase like it was a weapon. I was in the kitchen, removing the pear tart from the oven when I heard her heels click down the hall. I hope you enjoyed your performance, she said sharply. You've made your point, Evelyn. I didn't turn around. I didn't make a point, dear. I made a decision. She let out a brittle laugh. You know, you'll die alone in this house. That got me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was lazy. So many women her age think that's the worst fate imaginable. Solitude. But darling, I've had solitude. And I've had the company of people who made me feel like a ghost in my own home. I'll take the solitude, thank you. I faced her then, wiping my hands on my apron. Meredith, I've done many things alone. I've buried a husband, paid off 2 mortgages, and kept my lights on with nothing but grit and a calculator. I've sat in silence through dinners I wasn't thanked for and written checks I couldn't afford. If I die alone, I'll do it in peace. And with the thermostat exactly where I like it. Her jaw worked, trying to come up with a response. But there was none. I had burned the bridge and planted a garden in the ashes. She opened the door. You think Caden will forgive this? I tilted my head. Darling, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm finally asking for respect. She left without another word. Just the sound of that suitcase rattling across the porch and the slight slam of her car door. I watched her drive off through the living room window. No part of me flinched. Not even when Caden came in moments later, red-faced and pale. She says you humiliated her, he said quietly. She's humiliated because she didn't get her way, I replied. That's not the same thing. Mom, this is a lot. You went too far. I turned slowly. Caden, you didn't even ask me if she could stay here. You didn't ask if she could host her family here. You didn't ask if she could open a business in my sunroom. But I went too far? He didn't answer. Do you know how many holidays I've sat at this table with people who thought they were doing me a favor by tolerating me? I asked, voice trembling now, but not weak. Do you know how many times I've swallowed my pride to keep peace for you? His eyes dropped to the floor. I let her move in because I thought, maybe, this was just adjustment. Nerves. Youth. But Caden, I took a breath. She looked me in the eye and tried to rewrite the house around her, like I was already gone. He looked at me then, really looked, and what I saw in his face wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to fear. Meredith told me not to tell you, he admitted. About the business thing. She said you'd make it harder. Harder? I whispered. She was going to run a business in my sunroom and didn't even have the courtesy to say it out loud? He nodded. She already registered the name. Cottage Rituals. She put our address on the website. My knees nearly gave out. She had registered it? Used my home as a business address? Without my permission? I sank into a chair. That was when I knew this wasn't about personality conflicts. This wasn't a squabble over tinsel or brunch. This was a woman who thought she could claim land by simply decorating it. She wanted to replace the curtains in your room, Caden added, so softly I barely heard him. Said they didn't photograph well. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I wasn't just hurt, I was clear. She doesn't belong in this house, I said, and if you want to keep your key, you'll make sure she never comes back through that door. Caden's face crumpled, not in rage, in shame. He nodded. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't say anything. I just reached for the kettle. Because when the house has finally gone quiet and the chaos has burned off like fog, there is only one thing left to do. Make tea. And wait for the fallout. Because that wasn't the end of it. Oh no, the worst was still to come. The fallout arrived the next morning, wrapped in silk and silence. It wasn't Meredith who returned. It was her mother. At 9:42 a.m., a black Lexus pulled into my driveway, smooth as a threat. I was in the garden, pruning back my camellias, they always needed after Christmas, when I heard the car door close with a thud meant to be theatrical. I looked up to find her mother standing at the gate, oversized sunglasses and a camel coat, holding a manila envelope like it was a summons. Mrs. Halston, she said, stepping onto my path uninvited. We need to talk. I brushed soil from my gloves. Do we? I'd rather do this inside. I'd rather not do it at all, I said. She bristled, but smiled. The kind of smile rich women use when they're used to winning by patience alone. It's about Meredith. No, I said, straightening my spine. It's about me. She blinked, thrown off balance. I was generous, I continued. I opened my home, I shared my food, my time, my space, and your daughter tried to gentrify my Christmas. That's not just rude, that's invasive. Her hand tightened on the envelope. Meredith is devastated. I imagine she is, I said. Not because she's sorry, but because someone finally told her no. The woman stepped closer, her voice lowering. Do you understand what you've done? You've jeopardized their engagement. No, I said, voice calm but firm. She did that when she forgot whose roof she was under. That was when she pulled the oldest trick in the book. She was going to include you in the business, she said, holding out the envelope. 50%. She filed the LLC paperwork with your name as a partner. She wanted it to be a legacy brand, Evelyn. For you. I froze. She kept going, sweetening the poison. She said you had style, an eye for things, that you could help curate the image. Evelyn Halston, the elegant matriarch of cottage rituals. You'd be the brand's foundation. I opened the envelope. There it was. My name on the second line of a business registration. No signature, no consent. Just a quiet theft of identity, tucked between fonts and floral branding. And beneath that, a glossy proposal with photos of my sunroom turned into a showroom. Photos I hadn't taken. Ones she must have snapped during those quiet mornings when I was out back pulling weeds. You think this is a gift? I asked. Her mother raised a brow. I think it's an opportunity. No, I said, eyes still on the papers. It's theft. It's arrogance. It's trespassing dressed as flattery. I handed the envelope back. Tell your daughter that if she files this, I'll file an injunction, and if she uses my likeness or my home in any public material, I will pursue damages. Her mouth tightened. You're making this ugly. No, I said. She did. I'm just not hiding it anymore. She turned then, stiff and furious, and walked back to her car without another word. I stood there long after the engine faded, the wind rustling the trees like applause. I felt it then, deep in my bones, not vindication, not anger, freedom, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't done yet. You see, I hadn't just kicked Meredith out. I had started something. The next day I called my attorney. Yes, I have one. Her name is Judith, and she's about my age, sharp as crystal and twice as unyielding. I want to file a cease and desist, I told her, and I want a formal rescindment of that business registration with my name on it. Judith didn't even blink. Let's burn it down properly, she said. 2 days later, Meredith herself showed up on my porch. No makeup, puffy eyes, the glossy exterior stripped away. She didn't even knock, just stood there holding a piece of paper. You made your point, she said. I've withdrawn the LLC. I said nothing. I lost everything, she added. I raised an eyebrow. Did you? She hesitated. Caden, he doesn't look at me the same. No, I said softly, because now he sees the cost. She handed me the paper. It was signed, notarized, withdrawn. The company was gone. Cottage rituals dissolved. So what now? She asked. Now? Now I sip my tea. Now I light my own candles. The ones I bought from the dollar store. Thank you very much. Now I take back my sunroom. That January, the house went still again. No perfume lingering in the hallway. No whispering at the table. No small judgments disguised as suggestions. Just the steady rhythm of my own life returning to itself. It took 3 full days to clear the sunroom. She'd left little things behind. A sage bundle, a chipped mug that said Boss Babe, a lavender throw that smelled like expensive laundry soap and cold entitlement. I boxed it all up and left it on the porch. Caden picked it up himself. He didn't say much that day, just stood on the step holding the box, his eyes shadowed. She didn't mean to. Stop, I said gently, not unkind. Don't make her small to make this easier. He nodded. We're done, he said quietly. For real. I didn't say, I told you so. A mother's love doesn't have to gloat. It just has to wait. And sometimes, finally, it gets seen. That Sunday, he came to dinner alone, brought a bottle of red wine without asking if it matched the decor. We talked, really talked, about his job, about Dad, about how long it had been since we had sat across from each other without someone else's expectations clogging the air. At one point, he looked up and said, I forgot how much of this house is you, Mom, not just the walls, the feel of it. I smiled, quietly heartbroken and proud all at once. That's what she never understood, I said. She thought she was walking into a house with blank walls, but this place, it remembers. He stayed late, washed the dishes, no rushing off, no phone calls. Just my boy, coming back to himself in the quiet safety of the home I kept standing for so long. A few weeks passed. Judith confirmed the business registration had been nullified, wiped clean. I had her add a rider to my will, something subtle, firm. No inheritance shall pass to anyone not bound to this family by blood, marriage, or compassion. And then, I did something for me. I painted the sunroom, soft yellow, like daffodils after rain, hung linen curtains that danced when the breeze came through, set up my easel in the corner, an old habit I hadn't indulged since Harold died. I started to paint again. Nothing perfect, nothing pretty really, just color, just life. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the windows, I caught myself humming. A little old tune my mother used to sing, something about birds in spring, and I realized this was the first time in years I wasn't bracing for someone else's mood. I wasn't worried about stepping wrong or being too old, too much, too in the way. I was home, fully, finally, irrevocably. And darling, let me tell you, If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life, you know how sacred that is. Caden still comes by. He brings pie now. Store-bought, but he tries. He asks me questions. He listens to the answers. He doesn't talk about her anymore, and I don't ask. Some endings don't need ceremony, just peace. As for me, I take my tea at 4 o'clock. I water my violets. I read in the sunroom every morning while the light is kind. And some days, I imagine Meredith, wherever she landed, still trying to build a brand on borrowed light, never quite understanding why it all fell apart. The thing is, you can't steal home. You can't curate what you never cultivated. You can't plant yourself in another woman's roots and expect to bloom. I'm not angry anymore. I don't need to be. I have my house, my sunroom, my quiet mornings, my strength. And if the day ever comes when someone knocks on my door with a suitcase and a curated smile, I'll open it just wide enough to say, I hope you brought respect, because you won't get in without it. And I'll mean it, because I'm Evelyn, and I've reclaimed my space, my peace, my name. And that, my dear, is the most sacred legacy I could ever leave behind.